Hello and welcome back, Spiffers. It's good to see you. It's Jamie Woodhouse here again from SaaS Educators with your 5-minute Salesforce Spiff tip of the week. How's everybody? We have got one more week until 2026, the new year. It's kind of crazy, Hope you've all had an amazing new year. Hopefully you have all enjoyed your holiday season and I'm just excited. It's been a fun year. It's been a crazy kind of transition year, but it's been really fun and exciting. Sometimes transitions are a little scary. Sometimes they're fun. They're a little bit of both, probably. Last week, we spent some time talking about creating your very first payout rule with Datasheets. We're just going to keep it short and simple this week because probably nobody's working this week. It's the week between Christmas and New Year's. We all take this week off. So you might be watching this after the New Year's. If so, Happy New Year's. But let's just continue on. I have the link in the description of how to do this with a data sheet, which is recommended. But if you want to create a payout rule from a worksheet, this is how you do it. So let's get started. All right. We're logging into our Spiff system. We go to Designer. And last week, we created our new plan, the YouTube example plan. So when I click on that, I've got my line example that we line by line example that we created last week. Well, now we're going to just do one lump sum. It's creating a payout rule from just a summary metric from a worksheet. It just gives you a lump sum, and that's why we call it a lump sum example. So since I've already got the plan created, I'm just going to use the dots to the right of my new plan, and I'm going to add a new worksheet. Now, hopefully you've watched the datasheet example because I kind of went into some details around naming your datasheets and how it works. With worksheets, it's different because this is just going to be kind of a holding place for all of your summary calculations. And so instead of having a different worksheet per payout rule, I usually just have one worksheet per plan. And I do all of my summary calculations within that. There's, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but there might be some general calculations that I create that I use across all of my plans, and I can create a worksheet outside of all of the plans and are just kind of my general calculations I use everywhere. But this, usually I just do one worksheet per plan. So I'm going to name my worksheet after my plan. So this worksheet is just going to be called my YouTube example _ worksheet. Again, the worksheet is redundant because you've got the icon right here. I just like being super clear so that whoever replaces me as the next admin and is learning Spiff understands what are worksheets versus data sheets. We'll talk more about organization as we build a little bit more, but we're just going to kind of focus on this worksheet. Now, notice a big difference when you're starting with the worksheet is there's no filters that we have to choose. It's really giving us a blank canvas to start from. Back in 2023, I think it was, Spiff did a big push on redesigning this whole process because we know that Spiff admins are really, really good at spreadsheets. And you live in spreadsheets and you know spreadsheets and are better at spreadsheets than I am at spreadsheets. You guys are amazing and experts within spreadsheets. So we wanted this to give you kind of a good look and feel of the same thing as a spreadsheet, to be able to have cells and to be able to work on some things with it. It works very similar to a spreadsheet. The only thing that's really different between a spreadsheet and the worksheets within Spiff is usually spreadsheets outside of Spiff, just an Excel spreadsheet. You're bringing a lot of data into that spreadsheet and then you're manipulating that data. Well, since we're syncing the data from either spreadsheets we've uploaded, that gives me an idea for a future topic. I haven't shown you how to do that yet, so look forward to that in a future tip of the week on how to upload data from your own spreadsheets. But we're going to talk about Salesforce. The data has already been syncing into Spiff from Salesforce, so the data already exists somewhere else. We just have to reference it within this worksheet. But the nice thing about these worksheets too is, again, depending on how you want to organize things, you can really organize this however you want to. Some people just kind of keep it plain and just start building right away. I like to make it a little bit easier to understand or organize so that I can look at these spreadsheets and not have to kind of look through each of the names of the fields to figure out what they're doing. So I don't have really a good example to kind of start here because we're not going to be using a lot of information outside of the system to build these out. I'm just going to show you kind of a couple of examples. I was thinking of just doing one easy example like we did with the datasheet, but I'll give you a couple of other little tips and hints with worksheets here. So let's say I'm bringing in a lot of different quotas. So I can go ahead and put quotas here, and that will give me a title for this column so that I can put all of my different quotas here. Let's say I'm going to be doing my calculations or metrics here so that I can build out my calculations here. And then finally, I'm going to be doing my commissions here. If you don't start the field with an equal sign, it'll center it. It treats it as text. And I wish there was a way, unless they fix this or change this. No, there's no way to bold these. I kind of wish that you could, but there's no keyboard shortcuts to be able to do that. That's all right. Just because it's centered, it works out pretty well. Notice that when I hover over these, they give them a field name. We call this the field name, or I think Spiff calls it kind of the API name. Even though it's not an API, it's how you reference this field. Since these are just titles for columns, I don't need to worry about renaming the field name, which is a rule that I talked about last week, is that you always, every time you create a new field, you want to rename the field so that you can reference it. For these category ones, it's fine. You don't have to really worry too much about that. Because you're never going to actually reference these. This is just visibly for you as an admin so that you know, kind of giving you some organization to your spreadsheets. All right. So next, let's talk about, referencing too. You can reference different fields when you're building out calculations, just like a spreadsheet. The main difference here is that you don't use the coordinates like you would in a spreadsheet. So if I'm building out a quota here, I'm not going to reference that quota in a metric by saying A2. We played around with that idea at Spiff, and it just got really confusing because even though it felt like a spreadsheet more that way, it really kind of goes against the transparency of how we build things within Spiff. We'd rather it be a named field so you know what it's being used for, so that reps can see that, and it's a little bit more descriptive than just A2. Nobody would understand as a rep looking at their commission structure, oh, it's referencing A2, that means nothing to me. So we took that out and made it so that you have to name each one of those. All right. I can go way down rabbit holes here, but I'll try to keep this really simple. All right. Let's say that for the commission, all I want to do is use that same $100, but since this is a lump sum, if I put $100 in here, instead of it being like last week, a line by line, it's just going to be $100. We're not adding this to anything. We're not summing it up to anything. We're not multiplying to anything. This field does what I'm telling it to do. If I'm saying pay him $100, it's going to pay him $100. Doesn't matter who it is. So I'm going to rename this field so that I can use this, and I'm just going to call this my lump sum example commission. And every month they're going to get $100. Again, this is not really feasible in the real world. This is just for me to show you how these worksheets work. Once I get the commission figured out, I can create the payout rule same way that I did in Datasheets, where I click on create payout rule. I can say, okay, this is going to be my lump sum example. Take out my commission. That's the payout rule name that will show up on the rep statement. I go ahead and click create. It puts that purple $sign on that, meaning that this is a commission field. And I can go back to my YouTube example plan. Now I've got this new lump sum example, but notice since it's just referencing a summary level $100, it doesn't matter what month I'm in, it's going to be $100. Doesn't matter who I'm looking at, it's going to be $100. That's kind of the difference of a lump sum. We're not multiplying, or we're not doing it a per deal so that there's some kind of aggregate that we can use. It is purely just whatever is going to be in that cell is what we're going to see. If I go back to my worksheet, I can see that here as well. If I change any of these things, it's not going to change this because I don't have any calculations in here. So probably not a great example, because you're like, all right, Jamie, thanks for showing me the most basic lump sum and how to create it, but this is never gonna work the same way that I'm going to use it for. So let's go kind of a step further, and let's recreate what we did with the data sheet. And to refresh what we did last week with the data sheet is we're just going to give them $100 per deal that they closed. How do you think we would do that in a worksheet? Well, what we need to figure out is we need to build a metric or a calculation of how many deals did they close in each of the periods. All right, so let's go ahead and do that under our metrics. And this is where we can start using this kind of more like calculations we would in a spreadsheet. So if I had data and I wanted to get the number of closed deals in a period, how do you think I would do that? Well, just think of in a spreadsheet. If I've got a bunch of data and I want to know how many there are, what would I use? I'd use count, right? Well, it's the same way within Spiff. So I start with an equal sign, just like I would in a spreadsheet, and I start typing in count. Whenever we start typing in Spiff Designer, it's going to give us some hints of what we can do. I really like clicking on these functions as they give them, because then I get some more information to help me build this out within my worksheet. So if I say, okay, I want to do the count, it gives me these hints of, okay, I need to give it a list, and then I have an optional thing for an expression. Okay, that's not super helpful. So I can go ahead and click on the orange up above, which is the count, and it's going to open up my function library over here on the right tab, where it's going to give me more examples of how I can use this count. And what I want to actually see, I can't highlight this, but maybe this will at least show you where I'm looking at. I want to count from a data sheet or an object filter. It should say a data filter to make it a little bit more easy for us to understand. But I can count using this data sheet. So I could say, okay, I want to look at this data sheet and count the number of rows that are coming back. That's totally fine. But I'm going to use this as an example of, I don't even have this data sheet. So how would I do it just as a worksheet? It allows me to do the same thing with the data filter. So I use the same data filter name that I used within my data sheet where I referenced there. Make sure that you're in the parentheses here. And I use my closed by rep in period. So I start typing in closed by rep. I can see it kind of filters down, so I can choose. I can see the icons. These are different data filters. That's funny that the mouse over is hidden, but notice that these are all filters that I can choose from. So I choose my closed by rep in period. And that will give me the count of all the returns that I have within that data set or that data filter. And so that's all I need. If I go ahead and close that, then I can see that Ava closed 6 deals in December. If I go to October, it should be 12, right? Because we know that from what we used before. Every time I create a brand new field that I actually want to reference, I want to rename it. I want to drill that into your head. You rename those fields so that you have fields to reference. So I'm going to double click on that, and I'm just going to call this count of, I'm not going to use of, count closed by rep in period. Again, a little wordy, but I want to be able to know, oh, this is just giving me the count of the number of deals that they closed in the period. So I give it the data filter I referenced and kind of an explanation so that I can use this wherever I want to. That's the other thing too, that again, I'll get into more examples as we start building a little bit more in Designer. Now that this is in this data sheet, or excuse me, this worksheet, I can reference it anywhere. So if I ever wanted to get the count of what the rep closed in the period, I don't have to rebuild this on every worksheet. I can actually reference it wherever I want to and pull that data in now that it exists in the Spiff system. All right. So final thing, now that I've got how many the rep closed in the period, I want to multiply that by $100. So we can do the same, get the same amount that we got in the data sheet. Every deal they closed, we want to give them $100. Well, I got my lump sum example commission. I can use this if I wanted to, just to make it easy, because I don't want you guys to be like, why is he multiplying a commission field? I'm just going to add another option here so that you can see it. And we'll call this lump sum 2. So the other metric that I'm going to add is this is going to be $100 as well. But I'm just going to call this field. This field is going to be my lump sum example 2 commission amount. You can abbreviate that if you want to, so it's not as long. But that way I can kind of reference this and be like, all right, actually I wanted that to be $50. I could update that and it will update my calculations wherever that's used instead of having to update it everywhere. All right, but I'm going to do $100. And then I'm going to create a brand new commission. I'm going to do equals. And how would we get this $100 per deal? You just multiply these fields, just like you would in Excel. So the nice thing here is you can click to reference. So I've got my count. I can just click on that and it will automatically pull that into my equation. I could either also type the name out if we wanted to. And then every time we are building within Spiff, it's recommended to add spaces between things to make it more readable for the reps, because the reps can actually drill into this from their statement if they wanted to understand it. And if you don't use spaces, it starts getting really clunky. Also, every time you have a space you're adding something new, like a new formula or something like that, it'll give you the searchability and the tips and tricks as you use the drop downs. So more on that. I'm sure I'll use that more in the future. But we use the count, we multiply it by the commission amount. We go ahead and hit the blue check mark to save it. And now notice that when I update the dates, this amount will actually change based off of how many deals that they closed. And based off of the rep, I can see that that's kind of how that all works. All right. So I'm going to go back to Ava in October because that gives me my best metrics there. And since I have my new commission field, I'm just going to update the name of that. I'm going to call this my lump sum 2 example commission. And I'm going to create a new payout rule from that. So over here on the right-hand tab, or the right, yeah, that's a tab. It does show you that we're still in the function library when I was referencing and looking for my count. But I'm going to go back to my calculated field, which is by default with that highlighted. I'm going to create a new payout rule, add some spaces in there. This is my lump sum 2 example. Not a great name, but for our purposes, it does just fine. We create that, adds a purple $, meaning that there's a payout rule tied to this. And I can go ahead and click back here and notice that now there's a lump sum way that I can get to the same amount as my data sheet and my line by line example. So there's more than one way to skin a cat. That's not a very good term. I probably should have used something else, but that's just the term I grew up with. There's more than one way to bake a cake. I don't know. And so I can go ahead and look through all of those and notice that these match. This is just the worksheet way or the lump sum way versus this is the line by line way or the data sheet way. Lastly, let's just look at how this impacts our, or how it looks on statements for the rep. So I know the differences between lump sums and line by lines. I'm going to recalculate for everybody. So it will pull that new data that I created and add it to my commission statements. I'm going to exit Designer. I'm going to go to Ava. I want to go to October 1st, so I've got some good data. Again, I've got my YouTube example plan that I'm working on. I'm going to view that plan, not her live plan. And notice under my line by line example, it gives me a default line by line, which again, this isn't super helpful right now because we haven't really made changes to it, but at least I know how many deals and I can see more details of those deals. And I'm going to add that data in a future video. But under my lump sum 2 example, it's just going to give me the total amount. Same thing with this lump sum example. That's another big difference between lump sum rules and line by line rules or worksheets and data sheets. Worksheets are just going to give me the grand total because it has no data to pull from. It's just pulling from that one field that I'm referencing. I can definitely add some data to it from here, which again, we'll do in a future video, but that's why we recommend doing data sheets and doing it line by line like this, because it gives me a little bit more data to start with that I can tell the right story with my reps. All right. That was a little bit of a whirlwind, but hopefully that gives you an idea of worksheets and just really basic introduction on how to use a worksheet calculation, a summary level calculation to create a payout rule and create a commission amount for the reps that you're going to do. And hopefully you can start seeing what we talked about earlier with worksheets versus data sheets, the pros and the cons, why we recommend data sheets to use those as much as you can. Worksheets, it just takes a lot more effort and work to try and give the amount of information and make it more readable. But data sheets are where it's at if you can do it that way. Lump sums are just saved for those. If we can't do it, if really the way that we built the commission really has no breakout per deal or per opportunity, then of course you have to do it with a lump sum through a worksheet. All right, everybody. Hope you enjoy your week. Hope you enjoy your new year. And go to saaseducators.com. The link is in the description to go to my website to look for future boot camps that I'm coming to a city near you, where you can actually get your hands on a practice environment like I have, play around with it. We'll play around with it together. In those 3 days, I've been doing these boot camps for a few years now. Feedback is always amazing from everyone who comes, that they wish they would have done it sooner, because in 3 days, they really get to know and become a Spiff expert instead of picking and trying to find documentation and learning and doing it piece by piece. I know it's hard to get 3 days away from work, but it's well worth it, trust me. So I don't have dates yet for the 2026 fall season, or spring season, but those will be coming shortly. So keep looking back, and I'll announce it when I've got a video when those dates are posted. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a happy new year. Bye.